Good evening. My name is Ryan Guy, and it's been my honor the last 7 years to serve as the Director of Speech and Debate here at Modesto Junior College. I'm excited to welcome you all to our first ever virtual speech night. Tonight you're going to have an opportunity to meet many of the members of the Modesto Junior College Speech and Debate team as they perform events ranging from speeches, oral interv, and debate. As you're watching these events, if you find yourself thinking like, hey, this is something I would enjoy doing, please reach out to us. We're always on the lookout for new recruits, and we'd be excited to have you join us in the spring semester. Well, folks, I'm going to turn it over to my co-director, Professor Tori Shemp, and get the show started.
Gabby Cunningham. Michael Dahl. Jacob Kliachko. Brandon Ing. Clarice Perez. Christina Peterson. Kristen Platz. William Poles. Alexis Rangel. Jacob Rea. Bethany St. Smith. Jose Saldana. D'Angelo Sanchez Johnson. Sandy Sullivan. Celine Vivas. The Fall 2020 Speech and Debate Team. The first event is impromptu speaking. In this event, the speaker receives a random set of prompts and has only 2 minutes to prepare a 5-minute speech, drawing on relevant examples and providing meaningful analysis. Tonight, Jacob Kliachko will present the impromptu speech.
Good evening. For this impromptu speech, I have with me one blank note paper to prep and write down my speech on, and I have one folded piece of paper with my topics on it. Momentarily, I will unfold this piece of paper and I will start my prep time. My time starts now. If you had one shot, one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted in one moment, would you capture it, or would you let it slip? These were the words of Eminem's song, Lose Yourself. This song talks about Eminem's success story and where he started out. It tells a story of how many people told him time and time again that you won't make it, that you can't do it, you're not good enough. And how Eminem didn't listen to any of them, but rather pursued his career and became the successful, popular rapper that everybody knows today. His story came to mind when I received a quotation. I attribute my success to this. I never gave or took any excuses by Florence Nightingale. And I very much agree with this quote. There is no reason or excuse that we can give that could get in the way of us getting what we want and achieving our goals. And now I'd like to give 3 lenses of analysis where I think that this quotation is very well exemplified. First, we will look at the Batman, the Dark Knight. Then, we will look at the soldiers of the American Revolution. And lastly, we will take a look at the story of Walt Disney. So, without further ado, let's swing on over here and talk about Batman. Batman is, of course, the protector of Gotham. And Gotham has many cunning and devious villains, you might say. He likes to call them terrorists. Such as the Joker, the Penguin, the Riddler, and each of them have made very, very destructive and terrible plans. But the Batman has been able to figure all of them out. He finds a way to take down and put a stop to every single one of their plans. No matter how bad it gets, how bad it turns out, the Batman always turns out victorious. One very clear example where the Batman was very challenged, however he didn't give any excuses for his success, was when he fought Superman. In the late movie Batman vs. Superman, Batman very well knew what he was up against. Superman was basically a god, and Batman was a human, of course. However, Batman trained. He trained hard and created equipment that allowed him to take down Superman. In the end of that fight, Batman actually was victorious. However, somehow bringing up the fact that Batman's mom had the same name as Superman's mom kind of made things even between them or something. Anyway, that doesn't change the fact that Batman trained and did whatever he did whatever he had to do to take out Superman. He gave absolutely no excuses for not achieving his goal. Now, let's go back in time and look at a different sort of heroes. The soldiers of the American Revolution. The soldiers of the American Revolution were very disadvantaged and had plenty of reasons to give up and stop fighting for what they wanted in America. They had plenty of reasons to surrender to the British. They had a lack of resources. They were fighting in the snow and in the cold. The British had the advantage of several supplies from England, and they weren't even very well trained. However, they didn't stop fighting for the freedom and the liberty that they knew they could have in America. No matter how many times the British beat them, they knew that if they gave excuses, if they just complained about it, they would end up giving up and not achieving what they wanted. There were times when they were fighting in the snow, and they didn't even have shoes, but they didn't give up. They didn't give the excuse that we didn't have shoes and we're not going to fight this because it's in the snow and we're going to die of cold. No. They went up there and would have much rather died being shot, climbing through the snow and fighting, than giving up, taking a back seat and saying, we can't fight this, we can't win this, we don't stand a chance. They gave no excuses. And in the end, they achieved their goals. Now, let's come on back to present and look at Walt Disney. Walt Disney's story of Mickey Mouse was his very first. He wanted to put it out in newspapers and publish it. However, nobody wanted to buy it. Every publisher said that it's not going to sell, nobody's going to buy it, nobody's going to look at this stuff, man. But Walt Disney didn't give up. Walt Disney found a publisher who would publish his story. And so, Mickey Mouse came out in the newspapers as comic strips. It came out, and, well, people liked it. He was successful. He didn't only make his dream come true. He literally created a world and a universe where dreams come true. And this is all because he didn't give any excuses for achieving what he wanted. No matter how many people told him it's not going to work out, he kept going. He didn't give up. He kept working hard to get what he wanted. And now, he's created a world where dreams literally come true. Probably as a manifestation and as a tribute to his own life story. And now we can see that through each of these people, There's no excuse or reason we can give to stop us from achieving our goals. As Florence Nightingale said, I attribute my success to this. I never gave or took any excuses. None of these people gave excuses for their success. They didn't put up any obstacles that would have stopped them from achieving what they needed to achieve. Let's wrap things up looking at Eminem once again. He became the successful rapper that everybody knows today because he didn't stop working hard just because people said you're not going to make it. Just because people put up all of these obstacles hoping to get into his head saying it's not going to work. He worked hard and did what he had to do, and he, along with Batman, the soldiers of the American Revolution, and Walt Disney, proved to us that there's no excuses for success. We can do whatever we put our mind to if we just work for it.
The next performance you will see is poetry interpretation. In this event, performers must find and combine multiple poems centered on a common theme. Performers must shift their characterization and emotions fluidly as the pieces change. Tonight, Bethany St. Smith will perform her poetry piece.
So I'm driving down the street with my 4-year-old nephew. He knocking back a juice box, me a Snapple. Today, y'all, we doing that manly shit. I love watching the way his mind works. He asks a million questions. Uncle, why is the sky blue? Uncle, how do cars go? Uncle, why don't dogs talk? Uncle, he asks. Uncle, he asks. Uncle, as if his voice box is a warped record. I try my best to answer every question I do. I say, it's because the way the sun lights up the outer space. It's because engines make the wheels go. It's because our minds are quite like ours. I say yes, no, yes, no, maybe, I don't know, who knows? We laugh. He smiles at me, looks out the window, spots a cop car, and says, oh man, 5-0, Uncle, we gotta hide. I'll be honest, I'm not happy with the way that we raise our black boys. Don't like the fact that he learned how to hide from the cops well before he knew how to read. Don't like that his survival depends more on his ability to deal with the authorities rather than it does his own literacy. They trying to kill me. Stop searching for risk me. There are prayers in a black man's walk. Don't let them shoot me down where I'm standing. Don't let the white chalk line spy me. Don't let me die in the streets like an animal. I swear I'm a man. I swear I'm a man. And I wonder, is it the toxic stress of blackness that has caused our loud and thick ways to daintily quiet at the curb of privilege? Depression triggers a deep fall in academic performance, behavior, physical and mental health. There are 4 artists in this piece who call the same angered cry. Truth is, you already know why my fists are up. And you already know why my heart is hanging on my sleeve. What we need to now realize is that these artists' work span over the course of a century of systemic black doom. Now, if we commit to understanding the two, toxic stress, and how children are taught, we may begin the fight to bring color wars into light. Perhaps then we will see color as the most radiant contrast of life. According to the Economic Policy Institute and a report filed by Leila Morrissey and Richard Rothstein in May of 2019, African American children growing up poor are at a greater risk of disrupted physiological functioning and depressed academic achievement. 'Cause He's Black by Javon Johnson, Who But the Lord by Langston Hughes, When a Black Man Walks by Niall Israel, and A Litany for Survival by Audre Lorde. I looked and I saw that man they call law coming down the street at me. I had visions in my head of being laid out cold and dead, or else murdered by the 3rd degree. I said, oh Lord, if you can, save me from that man. Don't let him make a pope out of me. But the Lord, he was not quick. The Lord raised up his stick and beat the living hell out of me. Still, we both know it's not about whether the shooter is racist. It's about how poor black boys are treated as problems well before they're treated as people. Black boys in this country cannot afford to play cops and robbers if we're always considered the latter. Don't have the luxury of playing war when we're already in one. Where I'm from, seeing cop cars drive down the street feels a lot like low-flying planes in New York City. Where I'm from, routine traffic stops are more like minefields. Any wrong move could mean, well, your life. And how do I look at my nephew in his apple face and tell him to be strong? We both know black boys are murdered every day, simply for standing up for themselves. I take him by the hand. I say, be strong. I say, be smart. I say, be kind and polite. Know your laws. Be aware of how quickly your hands move from pocket to wallet for ID. Be more aware of how quickly the officer's hand moves to holster for gun. Be black, be a boy, and have fun, because this world will force you to become a man far more quickly than you ever need to. He lets go of my hand. Now I do not understand why God don't protect a man from police brutality. So who but the Lord can protect me? Where's he? Get up, I yell at him. In this car, in this family, we are not afraid of the law. I wonder if he can hear the uncertainty in my voice. Is today the day he learns that uncle's willing to lie to him, that I am more human than hero. We both know the truth is far more complex than do not hide. We both know too many black boys who disappeared, names are lost, know too well that we are the hard-boiled sons of Emmett Till. You ever see a black man walk? It's like Rhythm and Me that got up off a page and decided to move and glide with the spirit. You ever see a black man walk in Morse code style tap dancing like, I'm here? And those steps are messages, and you have to listen carefully. When a black man walks, a whole generation lives to see another day, another sunrise, another mouth to feed, another seed, another sacrifice saved, another poem, another hungry burning cross, another mother breathing in her son's ear more easy, more quiet. Keep your head down, boy. It don't matter if you're 60 or 16. For those who live at the shoreline, standing along the constant edges of decision, the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways, coming and going, in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward, in the hours between, at once, before, after, seeking a now that can breed futures. When a black man walks, he is always haunted. He is always animal. He is always standing out like a living corpse. He smells like a KKK appetizer. Flesh, nuggets of his own, dipped in blood. Wee! When a black man walks, how often does he find white women walking closely behind him? But you can't blame a white sister for liking the way a black man walks. She understands some things. And it's cool with the fact that her baby's gonna have nappy hair and that she won't know how to comb it. When a black man walks, wait for it. Listen to the orchestra playing beneath his feet. Pay attention to the vibrations when he walks into a room. See how many faces change to fear with the presence of a black man. See how many women hold their purses so tight till the fingers grow numb. See how many men hide their wish in the darkness would go away. Maybe choke itself to death. That ugly 2/3 human being, that next to nothing black dot, that useless prison black spot. When a black man walks, every day he is like Jesus, paranoid of the crucifixion. Every day he is like Trayvon, knowing his hoodie had nothing to do with his last breath. If only bullets could kill racism, poverty, and activism, slavery, you pay attention when a black man walks. You listen when a black man walks. His feet have a mind of their own, a compass, a honing device, 400 years of directions. And when we speak, we are afraid. Our words will not be heard nor welcomed. Find your way home safely. Don't let Jim Crow steal your soul. Don't let gentrification lose your memory. Don't let police brutality castrate you. Do what your mama said do. Run, run, run. When the teeth are covered in blood. Do what your mama said do. Run, run, run. When a black man walks, he ain't got time to walk. Death is always like, black men are the easiest to find. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering they are the strongest and the most fragile. They are the calm in the storm. They die like they expect to. When a black man walks, think of it as a masterpiece. A beautiful song that you may only hear once. Cherish it, you may never hear it again. We were never meant to survive. But Uncle, he says, what happens if the cop is really mean? And it scares me to know that he, like many black boys, is getting ready for a war I can't prepare him for.
Informative speeches introduce cutting-edge topics. The goal is not to sway an audience's opinion, but rather bring them to a greater understanding of the subject using substantial explanations and factual information. Tonight, our informative speaker is Kristen Platts.
On a warm day in the year 1846, the Reverend John McGowan exited his home to take a walk along the seaside. What started as a normal stroll through the countryside of Ireland became noteworthy enough that he detailed it in writing. He wrote, "I saw a thick white fog gradually creeping up the sides of the hills. I had once feared some great disaster. The next morning, when I traveled about in discharge of my duty, I saw the whole potato crop everywhere blighted. The leaves were blackened and hanging loosely from their stems, and a disagreeable odor filled the air. While it seems like an ancient tale plucked out of the history books, the Irish potato blight, known clinically as the fungal infections Phytophthora infestans, is just one of many crop diseases that affect the vast majority of food that we eat today. According to a June 2020 article from the Journal of Molecular Plant Pathology, plant epidemics are spreading silently, affecting crop yields and the global economy. The article goes on to explain that this is because the vast majority of food we consume today lacks genetic diversity. Thus, it is highly susceptible to being wiped out by just a single disease. Today, I'm here to talk to you about how scientists are using targeted mutation to prevent the onset and spread of crop disease. First, we'll weed out the reasons why crops are so susceptible. Second, we'll dig up some new methods of creating artificial genetic diversity. And third, we'll tend to some of the sprouting implications. First, let's look at the reasons why our food supply is so susceptible to disease. Since the advent of agriculture, human beings have sought to maximize yield and maintain consistency of the food produced. The agricultural practice that produces these results is known as monoculture. According to the 2020 text, The Basics of Plant Ecology, monoculture is the process of growing a single crop, plant, or variety in a farming system at a time. This is opposed to polyculture, where multiple species or varieties are grown in the same space. A March 2020 article by the Genetic Literacy Project explains that monoculturing has long since provided benefits to farmers, as it results in higher yields, use of less land, and higher profits. However, according to an October 2020 article from the Journal of Agriculture, Ecosystems, and Environment, monoculture crops are genetically identical to one another. In other words, that Fuji apple you ate 10 years ago is the genetic twin of one you would eat today. From a marketing perspective, this is great. Think about how annoyed you would be if your pumpkin spice latte tasted different every time you went to Starbucks. But from a health perspective, this presents a dangerous implication. You see, the genetic differences amongst living things help protect us from diseases. When a virus, bacteria, or fungus finds a way to attack a population of living things, small genetic differences can help protect against a disease, wiping out all the members of that population. However, in monoculture, this doesn't happen. The Irish potato blight I previously mentioned is a good example of this. According to a June 2020 article in the peer-reviewed journal Nature Food, What led to the failure of Ireland's most important crop was the simple lack of genetic variety. The Irish depended mostly on just one type of potato, the Irish limper potato. This led to a famine that sparked a mass migration and the deaths of more than 1 million people. The article argues that similar crop catastrophes are a very modern problem. In 2019, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations reported that diseases already account for 40% of crop loss. They write, "This leads to annual agricultural trade losses of over $220 billion, leaves millions of people facing hunger, and severely damages agriculture, which is the primary income source for poor rural communities." Now that we understand why crops are so susceptible, let's take a look at what we're doing to fix it. Genetic diversity is the best way to prevent the onset and spread of crop disease. The main means to accomplish this lies in targeted mutations in existing monoculture crops. According to an article published in the January 2019 issue of Journal of Genetically Modified Crops and Food, there are emerging technologies that would allow us to create new disease-resistant species. Let's dive into how this can work. We have relied on genetically modified crops for thousands of years. In fact, all food is genetically modified. This is because we have had to create plants that are acceptable for human consumption. In a March 2020 article published on Cornell University's Alliance for Science blog, James Burrell, a researcher in conservation genetics at Queen Mary University in London, explains, "There is not a single food product consumed by humans today that has not been genetically modified in this way. For example, corn was inedible in its original form. According to an article published in March 2020 by the Genetic Science Learning Center at the University of Utah, corn had only 5 to 10 hard, inedible kernels and almost no nutrients. However, over thousands of years, human beings replanted varieties with more kernels that tasted better, and over time, the corn we know today. This process is slow and relies on chance. However, this remains the most common form of controlling for crop characteristics. It has only been in the last 2 years or so that we have seen breakthroughs in our ability to move from random chance to targeted choice. Specifically, it was not previously possible to breed more than 2 traits together at a time. For example, if you wanted a tomato to taste better and be pest resistant, you had to pick just one of these options. This means improving a crop with multiple positive traits takes several generations of the plant. However, researchers from the French Agricultural Research and International Cooperation Organization, known as CIRAD, reported a breakthrough process that increases genetic diversity at a much more rapid pace. Their process, as published in the December 2019 issue of Nature Plants, allows for targeted mutation and the combination of more than 2 traits at a time. This is because they have identified a gene known as the RECQ4 gene, which was responsible for inhibiting the combination of traits. Now, researchers can find and deactivate this gene. This makes it possible to breed a plant with multiple positive traits in just 1 generation. There are several implications to this breakthrough. So now that we understand some of the new genetic modifications, let's move on to the possible outcomes. There are 2 significant implications. First, we may face difficulties in changing long-established farming practices. However, if we do, we could reap major rewards in the form of our second implication, disease prevention and crop production. First, the difficulties. The modern agriculture industry has become highly competitive. Many farmers have reason to prioritize planting crops that produce the greatest yield and the most profit. According to a January 2020 article posted by the National Resource Defense Council, this has led many farmers to not only plant the most profitable genetically modified crops. This perpetuates the problems associated with monoculture. Dr. Keith Edmonstein, a professor of crop science at North Carolina State University, explained in an August 2019 article that upcoming breakthroughs in bioengineering will facilitate the creation of large amounts of genetic diversity. However, it is necessary to convince producers to engage in polyculture and intercropping in order to hedge against wide-scale disease and crop destruction. This leads us to our second implication. Our new ability to disable the RECQ4 gene grants us the power to create these necessary polycultures. As farmers across the globe work to feed more people and new crop diseases continue to pop up, the likelihood that the global food supply can sustain itself with or without another pandemic is uncertain. An April 2020 article from the Chicago Council on Global Affairs explained, plant diseases not only cause food losses, they also waste inputs of seed, water, and fertilizer to nurture the crop, as well as the additional costs of labor, chemicals, and environmental impacts to fight disease. Crop loss is also directly related to malnutrition, economic instability, and even civil unrest. However, the advancement of modern crop science could be the answer that allows farmers to produce crops that resist disease and grow in more climates than ever before, giving the growing world population a better chance to sustain itself. Today, we have explored how scientists are using targeted mutation to prevent the onset and spread of crop disease. First, we looked at why crops are so susceptible. Second, we identified new methods of creating artificial genetic diversity. And third, we explored the implications. Reverend John McGowan chronicled just some of the devastating impacts the potato blight had on Ireland. Today, we face similar challenges, with a July 2020 article from SciDevNet suggesting that we are facing a crop disease pandemic sooner rather than later. Crop disease has posed a threat for generations, but old problems now have modern solutions. With innovative new strategies for genetic modification, we can improve the diversity and resiliency of our crops more quickly than ever before and harvest the rewards. Thank you.
The next event you will see is duo interpretation. In this event, two performers work together to present a piece of published literature. They seek to advance an argument by embodying characters and interpreting the narrative. Tonight, our duo performers are Bethany St. Smith and Alexis Rangel.
And then we were the last people to leave the park. The very last people to leave the park. Right, Emma?
No.
Yes, we were. And you're missing your online birthday party.
Emma, you're frozen again. I don't even see her.
They had to chase us out. You should have been there, Kat.
You couldn't have been the very last. Not the very last.
We were, I swear. Emma, weren't we the last ones out? We turned around and Disney World was empty, Disney World. It was like, what? The Pillar of Salt or Oedipus or something? Don't Look Back or...
It's Orpheus.
Oedipus.
It's Orpheus, not Oedipus.
Oedipus.
Emma, are you frozen? Did she have to leave?
I don't know. Well, we turned around. We saw absolutely no people. Disney World empty. The hundreds and hundreds of people, probably thousands and thousands, are in the parking lot behind us, trying to find their rental cars, trying to see if there's Goofy 42 or Mini 87, and they're carrying their crying kids. And we turned
You already
around.
said that. You already said that. Emma was just fine a minute ago. Did she have to leave?
Did you text her?
I did.
In a research study by UCL University College London, published August 5, 2020, loneliness is recognized as an international major public health concern.
It's considered to have a dynamic impact on these groups of people: young adults, women, people with lower education or income, the economically inactive, and people living alone.
The findings conclude that there's a vital need to find ways in which to prevent and reduce loneliness during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that it should be specifically targeted at the heavily weighted list of people that Alexis mentioned. It nearly includes
Everyone.
looking back.
Arlene Hutton.
So we're leaving the park and we turn around and look at Disney World and we see it empty behind us. Disney World, no people, empty. I was the last person to see
You
it.
couldn't have been the last.
We were, I'm telling you, it's historic.
The people hurting you out?
Why do you always disagree with me? I was there, you weren't. You could have been, you should have been. Our annual.
Weren't there people hurting you out of the park?
Well, yes, but for a moment we couldn't see them. They were like on the sides, making people leave. And we were looking backwards, and all we could see was Disney World and a castle in the distance, and no people. I was the last one to see it. It was like watching a movie.
I want to see a photo.
You didn't take a photo.
I don't believe you were the last people. You would have taken a photo.
Emma thought she did, but it turned out to be a selfie facing the wrong direction. Emma, you didn't get a picture, did you?
It didn't happen. You would have posted a picture.
We were living in the moment. We were in awe. Life is momentous, and as I know it, there will always be that moment. Being in a crowd. I haven't been around people since.
Well, the airport.
Yeah, but not like that. Like a really big crowd. And then we turned around. It really was the Magic Kingdom, all the sky and the clouds. And I kept looking. I was the last one to see it. That's a good name. Oedipus.
It's Orpheus.
I'm just saying, Oedipus is a good name.
A good name for what?
My new cat! I got a cat.
You did what?
I got a cat. I've tried a bunch of names, but nothing sticks. How about Oedipus Puss?
You adopted a cat.
I'm fostering.
You can't keep him. I'm allergic.
Sorry.
What's up behind you?
A new rug. I thought if I'm going to be exercising, I'll drive the downstairs neighbors crazy.
Can't afford a new rug.
Ah, you don't want me to have anything, do you?
That's not.
You're disagreeing with everything that I say. You always disagree, and you weren't even there. You were at Disney World. We've been going to Disney World together since like the end of high school.
Not
every spring
everybody.
break.
Not everybody.
I've been every year. You haven't. Emma's been.
I've been every single year too.
Except for this year, fraidy cat.
What?
You were afraid to like fly to Florida this year.
I was already upstate with my mom. She knew what was coming.
Disney World is our tradition.
I hate flying to Orlando. On the way there, it's too many kids on the plane and their parents are bribing them with sugar to behave, which only makes it worse. And on the way back, the queue lines to the airport are hours long because it's a bunch of people who never fly and don't know the rules, and they're all tired now and mad at each other, and the kids are crying, carrying all these big stuffed animals on the plane, and the park is so crowded during spring break. I hate it. I hate it every time. There, I think I hate going to Disney World, and I am glad I didn't have to go this year.
We missed you.
You did not. I'm tired of you and Emma making such a big deal about it and carrying all these big stuffed animals on the plane.
We missed your grumpy face.
Did Emma throw up again? Can she hear us? Emma, are you there?
She's gone. What if this is the last time?
What do you mean?
I mean, even if Disney World opens again,
When?
it won't be the same.
Nothing's ever going to be the same again.
Really?
No.
I don't think I'll go back again. Even if it does reopen again, what could be better than that moment? Being the last one to see Disney World as it once was. You see why I had to get a cat?
No. I don't know why you got a cat, and I don't know why you got a new rug.
Because I'm lonely. Because I miss you. When are you coming back?
My mom needs...
I need you.
You have Oedipus Puss.
You really are allergic to cats, aren't you?
I really am. Anytime I sneeze or cough, my mom thinks I'm getting the virus. I'm miserable.
Because of your mom's cat?
Because I'm not there with you.
Oh.
Emma told me she's thinking about getting a cat.
Emma wants a cat?
Yeah. Last time we talked, but the shelter didn't have any left. Emma, can you hear us? We have a birthday present for you. A cat named Eddie Puss Puss. Happy birthday!
He pees on the rug.
Emma doesn't have a rug.
My battery's not holding a charge. It's gonna...
Mom's got dinner ready anyway.
I wish she could have been there with me. Seeing Disney like that. It was the most magical and beautiful thing I'd ever seen.
I like the new rug.
The next event you will see is persuasive speaking. Persuasive speeches seek to identify an ongoing problem and propose a solution. The goal is to sway the audience's opinion and convince them that action must be taken to solve the problem. Speakers rely on credibility, emotion, and logic to make their case. Tonight, our persuasive speaker is Alexis Rangel.
The archetype of the farmer has long been a staple of the American mythos. A band of rugged individualists who aren't afraid of waking early, going to bed late, and quite literally getting their hands dirty. Farmers are salt of the earth, practical, and steady features of the landscape. Unfortunately, this mythos masks a growing mental health crisis arising in the American heartlands. Take the story of David Graft, documented in 2019 special feature published by the Montana Farm Bureau. He embodied the average American farmer. His work was his way of life, with David often laboring 90+ hours a week. He was a steadfast member of the community and often a resource to other farmers who followed David's instincts about when to plant and harvest. On October 13th, 2014, David's wife said goodbye to him as he left for a regular day of work in the fields. It was the last time they spoke. News came later that David had committed suicide. Stories like David's are becoming all too common. In January of 2020, the CDC reported that the suicide rate for farmers is double that of veterans, and the number has been on the rise for the last 2 decades. Despite this, the crisis has not received enough attention or resources. Thus, I am here to convince you that we must shake off the stigma and radically re-envision mental health care services in rural America. So today, we will explore the causes, effects, and solutions to a crisis that a 2019 New Republic article describes as too much to bear. Let's begin with the causes. Farming has never been work for the faint of heart, but according to a December 2019 article published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, the work has become even more challenging in the face of financial difficulties, climate variabilities, and physical injuries sustained on the job. First, financial difficulties and climate variabilities have pushed many farmers to their breaking point. David Widmer, an agricultural economist, told U.S. News and World Report in May 2020 that the events of the last 36 months or so couldn't have come at a worse time. Everyone in the economy is facing a headwind right now. It's just that the ag space is really behind. A 2019 Washington Post article also tells the stories of farmers who watch their livelihoods disappear in the form of loan delinquencies, harsh weather events that destroy crops, and increased costs from the administration's ongoing trade disputes. It should come as no surprise that these conditions led to significant personal and professional pressure for America's farmers. Take the Reichman family. A November 2019 Time magazine article explained that their profits have decreased by 40% over the last 6 years, and they make only $16 for every 100 pounds of milk they sell. But farmers like the Reichmans often have nowhere to turn. This leads to our second cause. A 2018 webinar hosted by the National Institute of Mental Health explained that there are serious shortages of mental health care services in rural America. They say the cold, hard facts about mental health and rural America is that more than 60% of rural Americans live in mental health professional shortage areas, and the mental health crisis responder for most rural Americans is a law enforcement officer. As pointed out by CNN in 2018, this means that mental health care is often seen as a last resort instead of a preventative measure or an ongoing program of therapy. That can have devastating consequences. Now that we understand the groundwork for the problem at hand, let's turn our attention to the effects. First, farmers are working harder for less, and second, the tragic consequences of suicide. In the 2018 Farms and Land Farms report by the CDC, the estimated number of farms in the United States is 2,029,200. This number is down 12,800 from 2017. This has left fewer farmers to feed more of the population without seeing a correlation in their own profit increase. This is especially true for smaller farms. The previously cited Time magazine article explains that even though the current administration has allocated more money for farm aid, the bulk of the money has gone to huge producers. This seems to be a driving philosophy. Time cites Sonny Perdue, Trump's agriculture secretary, as saying, in America, the big get bigger and the small go out. But this isn't like losing a regular job. The article goes on to say that farmers also face the loss of their homes, land, and identity. Many small farmers have expressed the helplessness they feel in this situation. This leads to our second critical effect, rising suicide rates. More than 450 farmers killed themselves across 9 Midwestern states from 2014 to 2018, according to a USA Today article published in March of 2020. Additionally, the previously cited Time magazine article explains that U.S. Farm owners and workers are 3 to 5 times more likely to kill themselves on the job compared to other occupations. A 2018 article published by the South Bend Tribune explains that these numbers may only represent a fraction of the actual cases, as not every state provided suicide data for every year, and some redacted portions of their data. Your life's work should not be your death sentence, and it doesn't have to be. Granted, farmers live a life of risk. A 2019 U.S. News and World Report article puts it this way: farmers are expected to face any challenge, often alone. If it is storming, they must tend to their animals or crops. If equipment breaks down, they must do the repairs. If soil crops fail, they still have to pay the bills. And if the domestic and world markets for their products collapse, they still have to sell their products at a loss. However, we can provide support to build resilience in the face of these challenges. Let's identify the steps we can take through personal choices and policy measures. The problem that we face is complicated, and we need solutions to recognize this. Recently, congressional leaders have called for action in 3 key ways. First, it is imperative that the CDC fund and conduct a comprehensive study on the issue. As I have formerly mentioned, the study on the problem is incomplete, and the data on the problem is incomplete. We've previously seen that when the CDC conducted studies on veteran suicide rates, it allowed them to make more informed choices about how to provide support and services. We need to do the same for our farmers. Second, Congress has to pass House Resolution 4820, the Seeding Rural Resilience Act. This bipartisan bill would establish USDA requirements for stress management trainings, authorize millions of dollars to put into awareness campaigns to decrease stigma and increase access to mental health care services, and require the Secretary of Agriculture to work with state and local governments, as well as the agricultural industry, to best implement mental health care practices on farms and ranches. Last, we need to take the steps to ease the burden on our farmers. Policies over the last 4 years have been devastating to the agricultural sector. As reported by the American Farm Bureau in March of 2020, farm bankruptcies at an all-time high, with almost 600 farms going out of business alone. This is directly related to the ongoing trade war and retaliatory tariffs by international buyers. It is imperative to let your elected representatives know that you do not support these aggressive trade policies. They have been proven time and again to be the detriment of American farmers. In that vein, I have created a website to help you take action. You can find more about my suggested solutions and who to contact to make them a reality on this site. At the end of my speech, I will post the link, or you can just type in the URL as I'm about to state. https:// www.sites.google.com/view/save-our-farmers. Today, we have seen that we must take action to address the growing mental health crisis in America's heartlands. We've understood certain causes, outlined important effects, and keyed out important solutions. At the end of his life, David Graft felt trapped. The stress of running his farm and dealing with a never-ending series of challenges pushed him to his limit. When David's son was interviewed by the Montana Farm Bureau about his father's death, he mentioned the most ironic part of the tragedy. His father had talked several other farmers out of ending their own lives. He only wished someone had been there for his dad. Our actions today could help make that a reality. Thank you.
We have come to our final event, debate. In this formal style of debate, two speakers are randomly assigned to support either the affirmative or negative of a given controversial issue. Tonight, you'll hear from two speakers. First, Michael Dahl, and second, Christina Peterson.
All right, and welcome to the debate. I want to welcome both of our debaters tonight as we get ready to dive into this round. Without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to the affirmative. And so Michael is the affirmative. This is the first affirmative constructive. You get 5 minutes for this speech. I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay. My 5 minutes starts now. Thank you guys for coming out here, and thank you, Judge, for being here. I'd like to begin with first with some resolutional analysis. So first, the resolution. Today we are here to debate the following topic. Charter schools do more harm than good. Second are the definitions. It's important to define charter schools. So the Oxford Dictionary defines charter schools as a publicly funded independent school established by teachers, parents, or community groups under the terms of a charter with a local or national authority. I realize this is kind of a long definition, but this essentially means charter schools receive government funding but are separate from public school districts. Now, third is the weighing mechanism. This is a value resolution that asks us to compare the potential negatives of charter schools against the potential benefits. If at the end of this debate, I'm able to prove that charter schools are more detrimental than good, you should vote for the affirmative. If the negative proves otherwise, you should vote for them. Thus, you should weigh the arguments in this round using a cost-benefit analysis. So my first contention is about funding charter schools. My claim here is that charter schools receive funding from the government. This is taxpayer money. However, despite receiving this money, charter schools have shown that they, one, waste money with oversight, and without oversight, and two, they underpay their teachers. So first, let's talk about wasting money. My evidence from this comes from a 2019 Forbes article by Peter Green. This report says that findings from the Network for Public Education shows that roughly 1 billion of that has been 1 billion of the funding for charter schools has been lost to fraud and waste in the charter school sector. This is because charter schools were awarded grants only to close down very quickly or never open at all. This article reports that this happened with roughly 1,800 charter schools. They write that this means that the failure rate is close to 37% nationally for charter schools. And some of this is due to embezzlement. A 2019 Washington Post article by Valerie Strauss documents a case where the chief executive of an LA-based charter school used money meant for students on lavish travel. However, this is not an isolated incident. A 2015 article from the Akron Beacon Journal reports that more than 4,000 audits in Ohio revealed that charter schools misspend public money nearly 4 times more often than any other type of taxpayer-funded agency. Second is charter schools ask more of their teachers while paying them less. My evidence for this comes from Diana Ravitch, who have to adhere to the same labor and disciplinary policy laws because they function independently. Because of this, she says, in most charter schools, young teachers work 50, 60, 70 hours a week. Teacher turnover is high, given the hours and intensity of the work. In addition to this, a 2019 Washington Post article by Valerie Strauss says that most charter schools are non-unionized and pay most teachers far less than district schools. My last point addresses the implications of these funding practices. As a taxpayer, your money is going into schools that are not well regulated. My evidence shows that your money has been wasted on failed charters or intentionally embezzled. Additionally, even when the schools do not open to serve or do open to serve students, the faculty is overworked and underpaid. This undervalues the work educators do and compromises the academic integrity of the schools. My second contention, which I'll try to brief up a little bit, is that it's too easy to get approved to run a charter school, and this causes them to be mismanaged. First is that, or is essentially that the educational outcomes are poor, rather. So my first piece of evidence is that poorly run charter schools get shut down mid-year, leaving students and their families to deal with unexpected closures. In California, 45 schools closed in 2018, the 2018-2019 year. Seven of these schools closed mid-semester with no warning. And now the next piece of evidence is that charter schools regularly inflate attendance, especially online charter schools. The Washington Post in 2015 reported that on average, online charter schools skipped out on 72 days of English and language arts and 80 days of math during a 180-day school year. And so the implication here is that these schools are just not giving students the proper time to learn their curriculum.
All right, thank you very much, Michael. We'll go ahead and now move into the first period of cross-examination. Christina, as the negative, you get 2 minutes to ask questions of your opponent. I'll start your time when you ask your first question.
Okay, let me just set my timer. Okay, so my first question, are you claiming that charter school teachers work more hours than traditional public school teachers?
Based on the evidence I have, yes, that's what I'm claiming. Although I don't know exactly how many more hours.
Okay, and is the problem of attendance unique to charter schools? Like, what I mean by that is, don't traditional public schools also see a problem with attendance?
They do, but not to the rate that charter schools have their problem.
Okay, great, thank you. And when you mentioned that 50% of charter schools closed, were they all mid-year or were some of them at the beginning or the end of the school year?
I do not know.
Okay, and my last question, aren't there some examples of successful charter schools?
I'm sure there are.
Not all of them are failures, right?
Not all of them are failures, but to characterize the small minority of successes as indicative of all charter schools would be inaccurate and misleading.
Okay, but I mean, they're not all a failure, right? There are some successful examples, right?
Yes, but only a small few.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's all I have.
All right, thanks a bunch, Christina. We'll go ahead and stop cross-examination there and turn things over to you for the first negative constructive speech. This one can be up to 6 minutes long, but give us a little roadmap of where you're headed before you start your time.
Of course, sounds good. Okay, so I just want to thank you all for being here. Thank you to our judge for evaluating the round, and thank you to my opponent for constructing a case against me. Before I begin, I'll give you a brief roadmap of where I'm going to be headed with this speech. First, I will be going over topic of case briefly. Then I will be responding to my opponent's two contentions. And finally, I will be making a counter contention of my own. With that, is anyone not ready? Okay, great. So first, I'd like to address a point on the resolutional analysis. I agree with affirmative's definitions. However, I would like to clarify my burden as far as the weighing mechanism goes for this round. So given the resolution, the affirmative must prove that charter schools do more harm than good. However, as the negative, I only need to prove that the benefits of charter schools are equal to the harms. I don't necessarily need to prove that they do more good than harm, even if I think that I can prove it. Moving on, I have several responses to my opponent's first contention. My opponent claims that charter schools waste money without oversight. However, this is simply not true. First, as part of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the federal government provides oversight of all U.S. charter schools to ensure that money is being used effectively and legally. In addition, that law also requires state governments to verify that all publicly funded charter schools are operating within the bounds of the law. Secondly, the affirmative wants you to believe that that it's a bad thing that charter schools are being shut down. However, I would like to point out that this is a sign that the system is in fact working. The schools that they're referring to are not meeting state and federal requirements as far as testing and standards. I would also note that the same system exists for public schools that fail to meet state and federal requirements. So it's not necessarily a bad that these things are being shut down. It's simply a scenario where they're not meeting standards and therefore they have to be shut down in order to provide students with a proper education. Finally, in response to the argument about teacher salaries, it is true that charter schools on average make 10 to 15% less than public school teachers. However, I want to note that this is offset by one, not having to pay union dues, and two, also being an at-will employee, meaning that they are not bound by a contract and they have the ability to accept better positions elsewhere at any time. Additionally, according to students commissioned by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in 2019, the average public school teacher works 11 to 12-hour days. This is roughly 60 hours a week, which is equivalent to the hour that charter school teachers work per the affirmative's own evidence. So in other words, they are equal. So it turns out that most teachers in general, whether it be at a traditional public school or a charter school, are underpaid. Now let's move on to my opponent's second contention. I will admit that there have been some problems with charter schools in the past. However, I want to make note that we have passed major legislation in 2018 to ensure that schools wouldn't close mid-year. So states such as Maine, Illinois, Nevada, New Mexico, North Carolina, and Wisconsin have all passed laws to provide better funding and oversight to grow their charter school programs and result in them not closing. Finally, I'd like to present a counter contention of my own. And so that counter contention is about student success. My claim is that charter schools produce better opportunities and outcomes for their students over traditional public schools. My first example of this is simple graduation rates. According to a 2019 study published by Mathematica, charter school graduation rates are 10 to 11% higher than public schools. And this includes students that are even traditionally at risk that have socioeconomic struggles. The study went on to say that charter schools graduates are also 10% more likely to enroll in college than their public school peers. My second example of this is that charter schools show exceptional success rates for minority students and socioeconomically disadvantaged students. In 2015, a report was released by Stanford University that showed that charter schools in traditionally impoverished areas had success rates among 23 to 48% higher than public schools in those areas. So special gains were seen in both math and reading scores on standardized testing. This evidence was confirmed by the Progressive Policy Institute's recent analysis of state exam scores, which found that charter schools in Boston, Memphis, Denver, and LA all had significantly outperformed public schools on standardized testing. My third example of this is that charter schools offer specialized programs to fulfill societal needs. For instance, in Detroit, the charter school Henry Ford Academy has a student population that is 85% African American. This school is designed around a social justice curriculum that prepares students to become lawyers and also learn more about the legal system. Additionally, other charter schools place a major focus on STEM education to students that are ready to transfer on to colleges and that focus on their career of choice. This meets a criteria need as the Economic Policy Institute reported in April of 2018 that 15.5% of high school students are in idle mode when they graduate, meaning that they have no plans to pursue a job or even college. However, charter schools are doing a much better job at narrowing this gap. Emphasis on STEM education paths help to prepare students to enroll directly in their planned field of study in college, or even just move into a career training. A peer reviewed from the Mathematica policy research showed that the comparative idle rate of charter school graduates was less than 2%, compared to traditional public schools' 15.5%. Finally, I just want to mention the implications of this counter contention. My evidence shows that charter schools are equal to, and often better, in fact, than public schools. This means that students are more likely to excel in subject matter, more likely to transfer to higher education institutes, and also more likely to receive innovative education that positions them for career success. And for these reasons, I strongly urge you to vote negative.
All right, thank you very much, Christina. Let's go ahead and open things back up for the second period of cross-examination. Michael, you control this one. You've got 2 minutes to ask questions. start the time when you start talking.
Okay, very good speech, Christina. My first question for you would be, who gets to go to charter schools?
So anyone can go to a charter school. What's so unique about them is they don't have any special applications put in place, and they don't necessarily limit the students that can attend them.
Okay. And then would you say that charter schools serve all students, including those with disabilities?
Yes, so actually, in compliance with the law, all schools have to follow the Individuals with a Disability Education Act, meaning that all students with disabilities are protected under that act. And so all publicly funded schools have to follow that law and accommodate those with disabilities.
Okay. And then what does it mean to be at will as a teacher?
So to be at will, it means that your employment at that place is totally optional. So you have chosen to be employed there willfully, and you can choose to leave at any time.
So does this mean then that they can be fired or laid off mid-year?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, given the fact that you're offered at will employment, you can leave at any time. You can choose to pursue different opportunities within another field. You can, as a result, be fired or laid off.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I need for cross-exam.
All right, great. We'll go ahead and stop cross-examination there. All right, we're headed into the rebuttal speeches. Michael, this is the first affirmative rebuttal. It's a 3-minute speech. Feel free to start when you like, but if you don't mind, give us a quick roadmap before you dive into it.
Okay, so for my roadmap, I'll start with off case with the counter contention and then move to on case. 3 minutes will start now. So let's begin with criteria. I accept the negatives caveat on the criteria. I'll be proving that on balance, charter schools have done more harm than good. Now, first, let's tackle graduation rates. I would argue that my opponent's data from Mathematica ignores certain types of high achievement college prep charter schools to get that 10% statistic. In fact, during my research, I looked at an analysis by Education Week in February of 2019 that cited a federal government analysis of the US charter schools that found that less than half of students who attend charter schools graduate compared to 74% and 94% at US public high school. This gets at a bigger issue with my opponent's case, which is that charter schools pick and choose their students. Some get to boast high success rates because they go after the best and brightest, while as was exposed in a UC Berkeley study back in 2016, making it difficult for struggling students to get past the application phase. Beyond that, Isaiah McFarland, one of the lead researchers, said it raises the question of whether high-performing charter schools are successful, in part because they screen out the costliest to educate students from their application pools due to the selection bias. Charter schools inflate their success. And then finally, I want to respond to the argument that charter schools provide an innovative curriculum. My opponent has offered a couple of examples, but when we look at the broad trends of this simply isn't the case. A report from the Network for Public Education argues that most charter schools rely on similar curriculum to public schools. The report explains that a survey of teaching methods in California schools found 87% of charter respondents use traditional approaches in their classroom. And then let's go to my contentions. So my first contention, my opponent argues that the federal government has been increasing oversight in charter schools, but that has not been true since 2017. In fact, since taking office, Educational Secretary Betsy DeVos has rolled back Obama-era enforcement of charter schools, as the Washington Post reported on December 10th, 2019. We've actually seen an uptick in corruption and complaints against charter schools. Next, my opponent argues that rates of charter schools being shut down is just a sign of the system working. I would argue that this is a huge problem because the charter schools aren't just any business. When the local JCPenney closes, it doesn't leave your kids without a school to go. Even if most of these closures are happening over the summer, that still leaves parents scrambling to find alternatives. I'll leave the rest of my rebuttal in my last speech. Thank you.
All right, thanks a bunch for that, Michael. All right, we'll go ahead and move into the negative rebuttal. And so, Christina, this is the negative rebuttal and summary speech. You get 5 minutes for this one. Two things. Remember to roadmap for your start, and also keep in mind that this is your last speech of the debate. All right, 5 minutes on the clock. We'll start after your roadmap.
Sounds good. So before I get into my final speech, I'd just like to thank you all again for being here. I think this has been a super fun debate, and I thank my opponent for putting those arguments together. Before I begin, I'll give you one more brief roadmap. So I will be revisiting my opponent's responses to his first two contentions, and then I will highlight my counter contention, and I will be telling you why you should vote for the negative today. Okay, with that, I will begin. So just as a reminder, I want to mention that the Elementary and Secondary Education Act provides oversight of all U.S. charter schools. So money is in fact being used effectively and legally. So we can't say that charter schools are deviating so much and spending money where it is not needed. Another huge reminder I want to give is that shutting schools down as part of my opponent's second contention is actually necessary, and it's done by both charter schools and public schools in order to assess those schools that just simply aren't performing as far as testing rates goes in students. We have to make that accommodation and shut down those that aren't meeting the requirements. So addressing my opponent's first contention, although teachers in charter schools do make less than public schools, I have to remind you that it's offset by one, not having to pay those expensive union dues, and also being an at-will employee. The fact that you're employed by choice and that you do have the ability to leave at any time makes a big difference in that sense. Additionally, we do see that teachers in charter schools and public schools are working the same amount of hours. So it is in fact a wash in that sense. They are not being overworked by any means. If anything, we have to account for both types of schools and say that they are both being overworked. Now let's move on to contention 2 once more. Again, I just want to reiterate the fact that we've enacted major legislation as of 2018 to ensure that schools would not close mid-year. So in order to better protect those parents who are scrambling around trying to find different alternatives, several states have passed laws to provide better funding and oversight to grow their charter school programs so that we don't run into those issues. Now I will address my counter contention once again, which is that of student success. So charter schools produce much better opportunities and outcomes for their students rather than traditional public schools. And this is a huge factor. We're considering student success, and in saying that charter schools provide better success, we're saying that we're saying that charter schools are doing more good than harm. And so my opponent failed to address the successes we've seen in graduation rates and also college outlook. We've seen that the graduation rates are 10 to 11% higher in charter schools than public schools, even including those students that are at risk as far as having socioeconomic struggles. Not to mention, charter school graduates are also 10% more likely to enroll in college than their public school peers. So by increasing students' outlook on college, we're better able to set them up for success in the long run by entering them in a charter school over a public school. My opponent also failed to address the fact that in traditionally impoverished areas, charter schools actually had success rates ranging from 23 to 48% higher than public schools in those same areas. So these gains were especially seen in both math and reading scores, but I just want to highlight that 23 to 48% higher success is a huge margin. And to say that charter schools are doing more harm is completely false. In this sense, they are doing way more good than harm than as seen in traditional public schools. And so just highlighting on my my third point for my counter contention was that of meeting societal needs. So as we saw in impoverished areas such as Detroit, where the population is 85% African American, we're implementing those programs such as STEM and law that further push those students to take those career paths. We're getting them more interested and setting them on the right track for either college or just entering their career of choice. So I just want to reiterate the importance of all these facts. My evidence shows that charter schools are equal to, and in most senses, better than traditional public schools. So this means that charter schools set those students up for success in both their subject matter at the time. It puts them on the right track to be enrolled in a higher institution. And it also allows them to receive a more innovative education that positions them for career success later on. So for these reasons, I feel that I've met my burden in saying that charter schools do just as much good as they do harm. And I've also even proven that charter schools are better than traditional public schools in most cases. And for these reasons, I strongly urge you to vote negative. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. All right, we'll go and stop the 1&C time there. And finally, we're going to turn the floor back over to our affirmative one last time. Michael, this is the second affirmative rebuttal and summary speech. You get 3 minutes for this one. Keep in mind that you start us with a roadmap and that it's your last speech of the debate. I'm ready when you are. Make sure to unmute.
Okay, cool. For a quick roadmap, I'll just go over the on-topic case, and then I'll respond to a few points that Christina made in her last speech. 3 minutes will start now. So as I was saying in my previous speech, the first contention is a win, largely because the affirmative doesn't have a solid answer to the issue about funding for charter schools. She points out that there are laws that help ensure that funding isn't super corrupted in any way, but when we look at the evidence, the reality is that the laws just aren't doing enough. I mean, one of my sources claimed or proved that they wasted $1 billion just from shutting down mid-year or never opening at all due to mismanagement. So that point is a win for the affirmative. And then next is the issue about poor educational outcomes in charter schools. And here my claim is that it's just too easy to get approved to run a charter school. And again, this means that they can be mismanaged. Specifically, if you look at, education, or not education, attendance, these students are often not getting, or they're missing way too many days. For example, out of a normal math, out of a normal school year, math students are missing 80 out of 180 of those days. And for English and language arts, they're missing out on 72 days of 180 days. And so, while yes, I agree with Christina that when the curriculum is tailored to the students, as we can see with charter schools, it is more beneficial. The reality is that these students just aren't attending school enough for them to actually reap the benefits of this modified, tailored curriculum. And then another thing that Christina never really mentioned, or she kind of just brushed aside, was that the teachers are at-will employees. She tried to spin this as a good thing, but the reality is that this means that they can be fired for literally any reason. My mom's a teacher, my grandpa's a teacher. They both really love their jobs, and their jobs are very important to, helping my dad, getting to college. And for me and my sister, my mom's, job is very important in funding our college careers. And so they're lucky enough that my grandpa and my mom were able to work at public schools. But if they were to work at a charter school, they could have been laid off for literally any reason, which would have jeopardized the career path for my parents and my sister and I. And so this is pretty important that these teachers don't have the proper job security, my bad. And so for all of these reasons, you should vote for the affirmative, that we prove that the education outcomes are just worse and the money is being mismanaged, and overall charter schools do more harm than good. Thank you.
All right, and I want to give a big thanks to both of you for coming out and doing this to debate tonight. It was both entertaining and highly educational, and we will leave it to the audience to make up their minds about who won the round. Thanks. Well, folks, I want to thank you for tuning in and watching the show tonight. I hope you enjoyed the speeches, the interp, and the debate. After watching all of this, if you find yourself really interested in this, please reach out to us. We're always looking for new recruits, and you can find information about how to contact us in the description page or by visiting www.mjcforensics.org. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.